This practice problem is designed to get you comfortable in computing the aggregate demand function and also in computing aggregate consumer surplus. So this is what I want you to do. Suppose that you're looking at a market that has two types of consumers, type 1 and type 2. There are 100 of each, and each consumer of type 1 has demand 100 minus P, and each of type 2 has demand 50 minus P. What I want you to do is, question, compute the consumer surplus for the market at a price of 25, both directly and indirectly. Please notice what I mean by directly is by using the formula that we just derived, and by indirectly, I want you to compute it for each individual and then add up across individuals, and you should verify that you get the same number. Well, let's solve the problem both ways. Let's do the indirectly first, the indirect path first. Notice that each consumer of type 1 has a demand function, if this is X and P, that looks like this. It's 100 minus P, so it crosses at 100 and 100. And this is type 1. And each consumer of type 2 has a demand function that looks very similar, except that it crosses at 50 in both cases. The expression is 50 minus P. Now, let's look at a price of 25. Oops. And ask, what is the consumer surplus? Notice that at a price of 25, this consumer buys 75, and this consumer buys 25. So, as you have learned, the consumer surplus for this individual is this area. So the consumer surplus for a type 1 is that area, which is 75 times 75 divided by 2, 75 squared divided by 2. The consumer surplus for this guy is that area, which is 25, consumer surplus 2 is 25 squared divided by 2. What is the consumer surplus for the market then? There is 100 individuals of each type, so it's 100 times 75 squared over 2 plus 25 squared over 2, which, if you do the numbers, gives you $312,500. Now let's think about the indirect computation. So what does the aggregate demand function look like to start with? Well, it should be easy to see, as we did in the previous example, that there are three key cuts here, 100, or critical prices, and 50. Above 100, the demand is 0. Nobody buys. Between 150, only type 1s buy. But there are 100 of them. So we have to multiply this demand by 100 to get 10,000 minus 100p. That is the demand curve in that region. Now, when we reach 50, both of them buy. This flattens, and the equation is 100 times this plus 100 times this, which is equal to 15,000 minus 200p. That is the demand in that region. Now, at a price of 25, the demand is 10,000 total units. For record in a second, at a price of 50, the demand is 5,000 units. Now, according to our formula, the consumer surplus for the market is going to be given by the area between the inverse demand function, which is this locus, and the price function. So it's going to be given by this. And let me label this A, B, and C. So according to our formula, the consumer market is going to be equal to A plus B plus C. It's easy to see that area of A is 1/2 times 50 times 5,000. Area B is 25 times 5,000. And C is equal to 1/2 25 times 5,000. If you compute that number with your calculator, you get $312,500, which is exactly the same.